Welcome to Hushed Ages. Close your eyes and let the history of America guide you into a deep, peaceful sleep. Before we begin our journey, take a moment to find the most comfortable position in your bed. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Unclench your jaw. Feel the weight of the day simply evaporate, leaving only the softness of your mattress and the gentle rhythm of your own breathing. Inhale deeply and exhale slowly, signaling to your body that it is time to rest. Now, let your mind drift away from the present moment. Picture the modern world dissolving, the electric lights fading, the hum of traffic quieting into nothingness. We are traveling back in time, drifting 400 years into the past, to the height of the Ottoman Empire. Imagine you are standing on a balcony overlooking the Bosphorus Strait. The air is cool and smells of salt water and cypress trees. Beneath you, the city of Constantinople, Istanbul, is still asleep under a blanket of pre-dawn mist. But behind you, the great iron gates of the Topkapi Palace are just beginning to creak open. You are about to step inside the most forbidden, private, and silent sanctuary on earth, the Imperial Harem. Here, behind high stone walls and intricate tile work, a hidden city wakes up. Walk with me now, silently, into the lantern-lit corridors of the past. The world is held in a suspension of gray and deep blue, a heavy blanket of silence that rests over the city of Istanbul like a physical weight. The water of the Bosphorus Strait is calm, moving only with the slow and rhythmic tide that has washed against these shores for thousands of years. You are standing within the high stone walls of the Topkapi Palace, a fortress of secrets and silence that is just beginning to stir from its slumber. The air here is cool and carries the distinct mineral scent of damp limestone and the salt spray rising from the sea below. It is the hour before dawn, a time when the boundary between the night and the day is thin and permeable. The grand architecture of the palace looms above you, a collection of domes and spires that are nothing more than silhouettes against the fading stars. There is a sense of immense weight here, the feeling of centuries of history pressing down into the cobblestones. You can feel the stillness in your own chest, a mirroring of the quiet that pervades the courtyards and the corridors. Somewhere in the distance, deep within the labyrinth of corridors, a singular sound breaks the stillness. It is the rhythmic, heavy clanking of iron against iron. This is the music of authority, the sound of the chief black eunuch making his first rounds. He carries a massive iron ring, a circle of metal heavy with the weight of 20 distinct keys, each one forged to open a specific gate that separates the waking world from the sleeping sanctuary of the Imperial Harem. You can hear his footsteps before you see him. They are slow and deliberate, the soft thud of leather slippers on ancient marble. But it is the keys that command your attention. They sway with his gait, clashing together with a dull and resonant chime that echoes down the long, empty hallway. Each key is large and cold, made of iron that has been polished smooth by the touch of generations of guards. You can imagine the texture of the metal, cool and unyielding, warming slightly in the grip of the chief eunuch's hand. He stops before a towering set of double doors made of dark walnut wood. The wood is old and dense, inlaid with geometric patterns of mother-of-pearl that catch the faint light of the lanterns. He selects a key. There is the scrape of metal finding the lock, a sound that is harsh and mechanical in the quiet morning. He turns it. The mechanism inside the door groans, a deep and Protestant creak of tumblers falling into place, followed by the heavy thud of the bolt sliding back. The gate swings open, not with a screech, but with a low hum of well-oiled hinges. The air inside the corridor is still stagnant and cold, trapped here since the shutters were closed the night before. The stone floors leach the warmth from the air, so the ritual of heat begins before the sun has even breached the horizon. Shadows detach themselves from the walls, young servants moving with practiced stealth to attend to the braziers. You can hear the sharp scratch of flint striking steel, a sudden spark that blooms in the darkness. For a brief moment, the air is filled with the sharp and acrid tang of sulfur, a biting scent that tickles the nose before it is replaced by something softer and more welcoming. The charcoal catches, the dry oak logs, seasoned for years to ensure a clean burn, begin to crackle. It is a comforting sound, the popping of wood and the hiss of escaping steam. The smell of the burning oak begins to drift through the hallway, a rich and earthy aroma that smells of the forest and dry leaves. It mingles with the lingering scent of beeswax polish on the furniture and the faint, dusty smell of old velvet curtains. You watch the orange glow of the embers intensify, casting long and dancing shadows against the white plaster walls. The heat radiates outward, a slow and invisible wave that pushes back the morning chill. It warms the tiles, it warms the air, and it invites the sleeping palace to wake. We drift now through the opening doors and out into the courtyard of the favorites, a private open-air square that sits at the heart of this hidden world. The morning mist is thick here, rolling off the Golden Horn in great white waves that spill over the palace walls. It dampens the cobblestones, turning the gray pavement into a slick and shining mirror that reflects the fading stars above. The mist carries the scent of the water, a brine that is crisp and clean, mixing with the damp earth of the palace gardens. You can feel the moisture on your skin, a cool and refreshing dew that settles on everything. The cypress trees that line the courtyard are shrouded in this fog, their tall and dark shapes looking like sentinels guarding the perimeter. Drops of water collect on the tips of their evergreen needles, growing heavy until they fall with a soft plip onto the stones below. It is a rhythmic dripping, a natural water clock counting down the seconds until sunrise. The courtyard is empty of people, save for the few guards who stand at the edges, blending into the stone and the mist. Standing at the periphery of the courtyard are the mute guards, men chosen specifically for their inability to speak, ensuring that the secrets of the Sultan remain forever within these walls. They communicate not with voices, but with a fluid and mesmerizing dance of hands and fingers. You watch as one guard signals to another, a gesture as subtle as a shifting shadow. There is no speech, only the soft and rhythmic rustle of their stiff brocade robes rubbing against itself. The fabric is heavy, woven with threads of silver and gold, and it makes a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement when they move. One guard raises a hand, his fingers tracing a shape in the air, a command regarding the security of the western gate. The other nods, a barely perceptible dip of the chin. Their eyes are alert, scanning the mist, watching the windows, ensuring that the silence remains unbroken. They move with a grace that defies their size, their leather boots making no sound on the wet stones. They are the ghosts of the harem, present but invisible, hearing everything but saying nothing. The only sound they contribute to the morning is the whisper of their clothing, the swish of silk and the creak of leather belts. The light is changing now, the deep indigo of the night giving way to a pale and bruised violet on the eastern horizon. The mist begins to glow with an inner luminescence, turning from gray to a soft and milky white. The first rays of the sun, still hidden below the earth, begin to strike the high windows of the dome, illuminating the intricate Iznik tiles that line the harem walls. The blue and turquoise glazes of the tiles seem to wake up, catching the ambient light and reflecting it back into the courtyard. You can see the patterns now, the endless intertwining vines and tulips painted in red and emerald green. The palace is transforming from a silhouette of stone into a jewel box of color. The chief black eunuch has finished his rounds of the outer gates. The braziers are burning with a steady and consistent heat. The mist is beginning to lift, revealing the wet and shining world beneath. The silence is no longer the silence of sleep, but the silence of anticipation. The great machine of the empire is awake, waiting for the first breath of the Sultan, waiting for the day to truly begin. The sun has now fully breached the horizon, casting long bands of pale yellow light across the tile floors. But deep within the service corridors of the Topkapi Palace, the light remains dim and functional. The air here is warmer than in the courtyards, thick with the complex and comforting aromas of 1,000 meals beginning their journey to the plates of the powerful. You are standing in the transition zone, a narrow and stone-lined passageway that serves as the border between the chaotic heat of the imperial kitchens and the secluded sanctuary of the harem. There is a sense of immense industry here, a hum of activity that is disciplined and quiet, driven by the absolute necessity of feeding hundreds of people without a single mistake. The walls are made of rough-hewn stone that feels cool to the touch, grounding you in the reality of the morning. Your attention is drawn to the wall that separates the male cooks from the female servers, a barrier that is both physical and symbolic. Embedded in this thick stone wall is the dollop, a cylindrical wooden shelf that rotates on a central axis, designed with the specific purpose of allowing objects to pass through while keeping the people on either side completely invisible to one another. The wood of the cupboard is dark and aged, likely walnut or oak, and it has been polished to a deep shine by the oil of 1,000,000 hands and the grease of countless meals. You watch the mechanism in action, a slow and deliberate revolution. On the kitchen side, invisible to you, a tray is placed on the shelf. There is a pause, a moment of stillness, and then the wood begins to turn. You hear the low rumble of the wooden cylinder moving within its housing, a sound like a heavy stone rolling over dry earth. As it turns, the smell of the kitchen wafts through, a sudden draft of roasting meat and blooming spices that is cut off as the shelf completes its rotation. The tray appears on your side, laden with covered dishes. A female servant, her face veiled and her movements silent, steps forward to retrieve it. She does not speak. She does not look through the gaps. She simply lifts the heavy copper tray, the metal handles clinking softly against her rings, and the wooden drum is spun back around to receive the next load. It is a rhythm of isolation and service, the wooden dollop acting as the silent gatekeeper of the morning meal. On a low table nearby, the ritual of safety is taking place with the seriousness of a religious ceremony. The Sultan's safety is the primary obsession of the palace, and nowhere is this more evident than in the inventory of the porcelain. You watch as a eunuch unpacks a crate of celadon bowls, the famous green ceramic imported all the way from the hills of China. The bowls are heavy and smooth. Their glaze a thick and milky jade color that feels cool and glass-like against the skin. There is a belief here, deeply held and never questioned, that this specific type of celadon will change color or crack if it comes into contact with poisoned food. The eunuch handles each bowl with a reverence that borders on fear. You hear the distinct, high-pitched ring of the pottery as he stacks them, a sound like small bells chiming in the quiet room. Click, click, click. He runs a finger around the rim of each bowl, checking for imperfections, his skin moving over the cool glaze. The light from a nearby lantern catches the surface of the bowls, making them glow with an internal light. He counts them, whispering the numbers under his breath, ensuring that every vessel is accounted for, that no rogue bowl has been introduced to the supply chain. The sound of the stacking is hypnotic, a repetitive percussion that marks the passage of time in the pantry. Next to the porcelain station, the most sacred element of the meal is being inspected. This is the Sultan's bread, baked in a dedicated oven that is used for no other purpose, handled only by the most trusted baker in the empire. The loaf is round and golden, the crust dusted with a fine layer of flour that looks like white sand. It sits on a silver tray, radiating a gentle warmth that you can feel from where you stand, a smell of yeast and toasted wheat that is primal and comforting. But your eyes focus on the seal. A distinct blob of red wax has been melted over the seam of the linen cloth that wraps the bread. This is the guarantee of purity. The official taster, a man whose life is perpetually on the line, steps forward. He leans in to inspect the wax. You can see the intricate impression of the baker's signet ring in the hardened red pool. It is unbroken. The taster nods, satisfied. He reaches out and breaks the wax. There is a sharp, dry snap, a sound like a twig breaking in a silent forest. The linen falls away, releasing a fresh wave of steam from the warm bread. The crust crackles as he breaks off a small piece for himself, the sound of the crisp exterior giving way to the soft, airy crumb inside. He chews slowly, his eyes closed, waiting for any sign of bitterness, any trace of danger. The room holds its breath. He swallows. He waits. The silence stretches out, filled only by the distant sound of the wind rattling the shutters. He nods again. The bread is safe. In the corner of the room, far removed from the heat of the bread, the air is cold and sweet. This is where the sherbet is being prepared, a luxury that defies the season and the geography. On the stone counter sits a block of compressed snow, a miracle of logistics brought down from the high peaks of Mount Yaludag, wrapped in straw and felt to survive the journey to the city. The snow is hard and crystalline, glittering in the lantern light, radiating a chill that you can feel on your face. A servant is chipping away at it with a silver pick, the metal chinking against the ice, shaving off delicate flakes that pile up like diamond dust in a large copper bowl. The smell here is overwhelming and beautiful. A jar of rose syrup has been opened, releasing the essence of thousands of petals crushed and boiled down to a thick, ruby red liquid. It smells of summer gardens, of heavy blooms and sticky nectar. The servant pours the syrup over the shaved snow. You watch the red liquid bleed into the white ice, creating veins of color that swirl and merge. She adds a pinch of musk and a spoonful of white sugar, mixing it all together with a long-handled spoon. The sound is slushy and soft, the scraping of metal against copper dampened by the thick mixture. The scent fills the entire pantry, a floral cloud that masks the smell of the charcoal and the stone. It is the smell of pure indulgence, a reminder that within these grim walls of stone and iron, there is still space for the delicate and the sweet. The sherbet is ladled into the celadone bowls, the cold liquid chilling the green ceramic, ready to be placed on the rotating shelf, ready to disappear into the hidden world on the other side of the wall. The sun has climbed higher now, and the pale light of dawn has hardened into the clear and bright gold of mid-morning, illuminating the dust motes that dance in the shafts of light streaming through the high windows of the training hall. You are entering the School of Silence, a vast and rectangular chamber lined with low divans and covered in carpets that dampen every footstep, a place where the air feels heavy with concentration and the weight of unspoken expectations. It is here that the novices, the young girls brought from the furthest corners of the empire, are slowly and methodically transformed into the refined residents of the imperial court. There is no laughter here, no idle chatter, only the sound of breathing and the focused friction of work. The room smells of old paper, dry wood, and the faint metallic tang of needles, a scent that is clean and austere. You can feel the discipline in the air, a tangible pressure that keeps spines straight and heads held high. In the center of the room, 20 girls sit in a perfect circle, their legs tucked beneath them on the cushions, their posture rigid and unmoving. They are engaged in the art of embroidery, but this is not a leisure activity. It is a drill of precision and endurance that tests the limits of their patience. You move closer to watch the work, focusing on the sensory details of the needle and the thread. They are working with heavy crimson velvet, a fabric so thick and dense that it resists the needle, requiring a specific and deliberate force to puncture. The thread is not cotton but real gold wire, spun so fine it behaves like silk, yet it retains the stiffness of metal. You can hear the sound of the work, a rhythmic and collective thwip as 20 needles pierce the taut fabric at the exact same moment. It is a soft percussion, followed by the zipping sound of the textured gold thread being pulled through the velvet pile. The fabric is stretched tight over circular wooden hoops, creating a drum-like surface that amplifies the friction. You watch the hands of a young girl, her fingers calloused at the tips, as she guides the needle with absolute stillness. She must find the exact point in the pattern, pushing the gold wire through without snagging the delicate silk below. The tension on the hoop is immense. You can hear the faint creak of the wood as the fabric pulls against it. There is a hypnotic quality to the repetition, the flash of the gold needle in the sun, the dip of the hand, the pull of the thread, the silence that follows. It is a meditation in motion, a silencing of the mind through the exhaustion of the fingers. We leave the circle of embroiderers and drift to the long corridor that runs along the eastern wall of the school, where the lessons of the body are taking place. Here, the focus is on the walk, the famous gliding gait of the palace that creates the illusion of floating, ensuring that no servant ever disturbs the peace of the Sultan with a heavy footfall. A row of novices stands at one end of the hallway, each balancing a heavy, leather-bound book on the crown of her head. The books are old, filled with legal texts or theology, their covers worn smooth and slippery, making the task of balancing them even more difficult. You can feel the physical strain in the girls' necks, the way the small muscles tighten to create a stable platform for the weight. They begin to move. The instruction is to walk without bobbing, to keep the head perfectly level while the legs do the work. You watch their feet. They are bare, moving across a runner of thick Eunuch carpet that swallows their toes. The technique requires a rolling motion, placing the heel down softly and rolling through to the ball of the foot, knees constantly bent to absorb the shock of the step. It is a grueling, burning sensation in the thighs, hidden beneath the flowing layers of their salwar trousers. You listen for the sound of their movement, but there is none. There is only the softest compression of the wool carpet, a sound like a whisper against the floor. If a book falls, It hits the ground with a startling, flat slap that echoes like a gunshot in the quiet hall, a failure that breaks the spell. But for now, the books remain aloft, a floating library moving silently through the shafts of light, a testament to the control of the body over the environment. Adjacent to the corridor is the scriptorium, a smaller room where the air is cooler and smells intensely of iron gall ink and reeds. This is where the mind is sharpened, where the girls learn the languages of the court and the art of calligraphy. The silence here is different. It is the silence of intellectual effort. You can hear the scratching of the callum, the traditional reed pen, against the surface of polished paper. The sound is distinct and textured, a dry scratch that varies in pitch depending on the curve of the letter. The paper is burnished with an agate stone until it is smooth as glass, allowing the ink to sit on the surface rather than sinking in. You watch the black ink flow from the split nib of the reed, wet and glistening, forming the sweeping curves of the Persian alphabet. The girls are copying poetry, the verses of Hafez or Rumi, whispering the words under their breath to understand the rhythm of the meter. The sound is a low, sibilant murmuring, a collective exhaling of poetry that fills the room like a soft breeze. Agar and Torque-i-Shirazi, the words float in the air, unintelligible whispers to the untrained ear, but full of longing and beauty. You focus on the smell of the ink, a pungent and earthy scent derived from oak galls and soot, a smell that stains the fingers and lingers in the wood of the desks. It is the smell of permanence, of words that will outlast the stone walls of the palace. The scratching of the pens creates a rhythm, a dry and scratching metronome that marks the passage of the morning hours. Finally, we move to the back of the school, to the laundry sorting room, a space that is purely tactile and olfactory. Here, the glamorous illusion of the palace is stripped away to reveal the mechanics of daily life. Piles of linens have been brought in from the washing courtyards, mountains of white fabric that need to be sorted, inspected, and folded. The air here is thick with the scent of dried lavender, which is stored in sachets within the folds of the cloth to repel moths and sweeten the bedding. It is a clean, herbal smell that clears the head, mixing with the scent of sun-baked cotton. You watch the hands of the novices as they sort the laundry by touch alone. This is a lesson in hierarchy. They run their fingers over the fabrics, distinguishing the rough, sturdy cotton meant for the cleaning staff from the impossibly soft, translucent silk intended for the Sultan and the favorites. You can hear the difference in the fabrics as they are handled. The cotton makes a crisp, dry rustle, a sound of utility and strength. The silk is silent, slipping over itself like water, making only a faint whispering sound as it is folded. The girls work in a rhythm, snapping the sheets to straighten them, a sound like the flapping of sails in a light wind. Snap, fold smooth. The repetitive motion is soothing, a domestic ritual that grounds the ethereal world of the harem in the reality of woven thread. You focus on the texture of the lavender buds, dry and brittle, crumbling slightly as they are tucked between the layers of silk. The dust of the lavender rises in the air, sparkling in the light, settling on the dark wood of the sorting tables. The room is a sanctuary of clean smells and soft textures, a quiet corner where the day's labor is measured in neat stacks of white linen, rising like columns of snow in the dim light. The morning has matured into a steady and brilliant fullness, the sun now hanging high above the golden horn and casting its warm and authoritative light onto the private balconies of the imperial harem. You are stepping now into the most secluded and powerful sanctuary within this city of women, the private chambers of the Valide Sultan, the Queen Mother. The air here is different. It possesses a stillness that is not born of emptiness, but of absolute control, a heavy and deliberate quiet where the fate of the dynasty is managed not with swords, but with the stroke of a pen. The room is vast and lined with panels of fruitwood and mother of pearl, but your attention is drawn to the center of the space where the business of the empire is being conducted. The Valide Sultan sits at a low table inlaid with ivory, her posture rigid and upright, surrounded by the towering stacks of the harem's ledgers. You can see the dust motes dancing in the thick beams of light that cut through the latticework of the windows, tiny galaxies of golden dust swirling in the silence. They move in slow currents, disturbed only by the movement of her hand as she reaches for the heavy ledger that chronicles the expenses of the household. The sound that dominates this room is the dry and rhythmic scratching of a reed pen moving across parchment. It is a sound of administration, a tactile and friction-filled noise that speaks of order and oversight. The paper is thick and creamy, imported from the mills of Samarkand, and it has a texture that you can almost feel, a slight roughness that catches the nib of the pen. The Valide Sultan is signing financial decrees, authorizing the purchase of winter firewood, the repair of the aqueducts, the stipends for the hundreds of women under her care. You watch the black ink flow from the tip of the reed, glistening and wet for a moment before sinking into the fibers of the paper. Scritch, scratch, pause. The rhythm is steady and hypnotic. She turns a page, the heavy paper making a distinct and crinkling sound, a noise like dry leaves being crushed underfoot. The smell of the ledger is the smell of authority, a mix of old glue, gall ink, and the dust of archives. It is a boring task, a mundane reality of checking sums and balancing columns. Yet in this room, bathed in the golden light of late morning, it takes on the weight of a sacred ritual. The dust motes continue their slow waltz in the light, indifferent to the wealth being moved with each signature, marking the passage of time in a room where time seems to stand still. While the pen continues its work, a faint and distinct aroma begins to rise in the corner of the room, a scent that is entirely unique to this chamber and this hour. A small silver brazier has been placed on a side table, fed by a single piece of glowing charcoal that radiates a gentle and focused heat. Hovering above the heat is a long-handled copper pan, and inside, a servant is slowly roasting raw coffee beans. This is the coffee ritual, a privilege of the highest court, and the smell is intoxicating. It starts as a grassy, vegetal scent as the green beans warm up, but slowly, as the heat penetrates the shell, it deepens into something dark and complex. You can smell the smoke, the oil, the bitterness of the roast, a heavy and rich perfume that cuts through the stale air of the palace. The servant moves the pan in a slow, circular motion, the beans tumbling over one another with a soft, dry rattling sound. Shoo shhh, shhh. It is the sound of rain on a tin roof, a comforting background noise to the scratching of the pen. The smell grows stronger, filling the Valide's chamber with the essence of burnt sugar and earth, a scent that signals alertness and luxury. It is a sharp contrast to the floral sweetness of the sherbet pantry or the soap of the laundry. It is a serious smell for a serious room, grounding you in the sensory reality of the Queen Mother's daily routine. On the divan to the left of the writing desk, the morning's deliveries have arrived, bringing the textures of the world into this enclosed space. Merchants from the silk markets of Bursa and the trading ships of Venice have sent their finest bolts of cloth for inspection, and they lie now in heavy rolls, waiting to be judged. You move closer to the fabrics, your eyes tracing the weave and the sheen of the materials. There is a bolt of Venetian velvet, a deep and absorbing crimson that seems to swallow the light. The valet pauses her writing to reach out, her hand brushing against the pile of the velvet. You can imagine the sensation, the dense and soft resistance of the fabric, the way the fibers stand up and then smooth down under the pressure of her fingers. It is heavy cloth, intended for winter caftans, and when the servant unfolds a length of it, it makes a low, muffled thud, a sound of weight and quality. Next to it lies the Bursa silk, shimmering with threads of silver, light and fluid like running water. The sound of the silk is different. It whispers and hisses as it slides against itself, a high-pitched friction that speaks of delicacy and summer heat. The inspection is tactile and silent. The valet tests the weight, pulling on the bias of the fabric to check the weave, looking for any weakness, any inconsistency. The room is filled with the faint smells of the dye house and the loom, the scent of wool and indigo, the smell of the trade routes that connect this room to the wider world. Once the ledgers are closed and the fabrics approved, the final task of the morning begins, a task of preservation and shine. A servant brings forward a large silver tray, and upon it lies a tangle of green fire. It is the valet Sultan's emerald necklace, a heavy and ancient piece of jewelry that requires daily care to maintain its luster. The emeralds are massive, deep green stones that look like frozen pieces of a forest lake, set in heavy gold casings. The servant picks up a piece of chamois leather, a soft and tan cloth made from the skin of a mountain goat, cured until it is as smooth as butter. You listen to the sound of the cleaning. It is a soft, rhythmic squeak as the leather is rubbed against the face of the gemstone. Rub, squeak, polish. The leather drags slightly over the cold, glassy surface of the stone, removing the oils of the skin and the dust of the room. When the servant sets the necklace back down on the silver tray, there is a sharp and distinct click. Clack. Stone hitting metal. It is a cold sound, a sound of hardness and durability. You watch the light catch the freshly polished facets of the emeralds, sending green sparks shooting across the ceiling, mingling with the dust motes. The gold setting is wiped down next, the chamois gliding over the metal, warming it slightly. There is no awe in this action, only the routine maintenance of wealth, the necessary chore of keeping the symbols of power bright and imposing. The smell of the leather is faint and animalistic, mixing with the lingering scent of the roasted coffee and the ink. The morning has been spent in the service of logistics, of ensuring that the accounts balance, the clothes are warm, and the jewels are bright. The valet Sultan sits back, the silence of the room settling around her once more. The scratching of the pen finally ceased, leaving only the distant sound of the wind pushing against the high stone walls. The sun is now at its absolute zenith, hanging directly over the lead-covered domes of the palace, pressing down on the city with a weight that banishes all shadows. You are standing before the heavy wooden doors of the Imperial Hamam, the great bathhouse that serves as the lungs of the harem, a place where the heat of the day is met with the even greater heat of the steam. As you push through the doors, the dry air of the outside world is instantly replaced by a wall of humidity, a thick and visible atmosphere that clings to your skin and fogs the vision. But before we step onto the wet marble, we must first understand the invisible engine that powers this sweating sanctuary. We must descend in our minds beneath the floor, down into the subterranean darkness of the hypocaust, the hidden level where the true labor of the bathhouse takes place. It is a world of dry heat and dust, a stark contrast to the wet luxury above. Here, in the cramped brick tunnels that run like arteries under the palace, the furnaces are roaring. You can hear the low, throaty rumble of the fire, a sound that vibrates through the soles of your feet, even on the ground above. The furnaces are fed with logs of dried pine and oak, thrown into the maw of the fire by men who work stripped to the waist, their skin coated in soot and sweat. The heat here is intense and aggressive, a dry blast that rushes through the brick channels and hollow spaces beneath the marble floor of the bathhouse. You can hear the groaning of the pipes, the metallic creak of copper and lead expanding under the thermal stress. It is the sound of a great machine breathing, the expanding metal ticking and pinging in the darkness as the hot air circulates, heating the stone slabs above until they are almost too hot to touch. This is the grim engineering of comfort, a hidden industrial effort that turns the bathhouse floor into a radiator, a system unchanged since the days of Rome, working tirelessly to ensure the Sultan's women never feel the chill of the stone. Rise now, up through the layers of brick and mortar, through the heated floor, and into the main chamber of the Hamam, the Sikaklik. The room is a vast dome of white marble, pierced by small star-shaped windows that let in beams of diffuse, misty light. The acoustics here are wild and resonant, amplifying every drop of water into a note of music. The air smells of wet stone, a mineral scent that is ancient and clean, mixed with the faint, soapy smell of olive oil. In the center of the room lies the Göbek Taşı, the large, raised platform of marble that sits directly above the hottest part of the furnace. It is here that the ritual of the scrub, the keys, takes place. This is not a gentle massage. It is a rigorous and abrasive act of hygiene designed to purify the body completely. You watch as a bather lies prone on the hot stone, her skin glistening with perspiration. An attendant stands over her, wearing a mitt made of coarse, dark goat hair. The texture of the mitt is rough, like sandpaper or dried bark, designed to bite into the skin. You can hear the sound of the scrubbing, a rhythmic shhhshhhshhh that echoes off the dome. It is the sound of friction, of the goat hair dragging across the wet skin, sloughing off the layers of dead cells and city dust. The skin turns pink, then a deep, flushed red under the pressure. It is a grim and necessary cleaning, a physical stripping away of the old self. You can see the small rolls of gray dead skin forming on the marble, a visual testament to the harsh effectiveness of the goat hair. Then comes the water. The attendant dips a copper bowl into a basin of hot water. The metal scrapes against the stone edge of the basin, a sharp clink that rings out clearly. She throws the water over the bather. Splash. The sound is explosive in the echo chamber of the bath. The water hits the hot marble floor and instantly sizzles, sending up a fresh cloud of steam. The water sluices over the red skin, washing away the debris, leaving behind a surface that is raw and polished. The cycle repeats, the scratching of the mitt and the crashing of the water, a rhythm of abrasion and relief that defines the midday hours. Move now to the smaller, private alcoves that line the perimeter of the main room, where the air is still and heavy with a different, more pungent smell. This is the scent of the depilatory paste, the rusma, a concoction that represents the unglamorous reality of the harem's beauty standards. To be smooth, to be hairless, requires a flirtation with poison. The smell is unmistakable, a sharp and choking odor of rotten eggs and burning matches, the telltale scent of sulfur and chemical reaction. In a small ceramic bowl, an attendant is mixing the paste. It is a thick, gray sludge, heavy and viscous like wet clay or river mud. The ingredients are harsh and elemental, a mixture of quicklime and orpiment, a mineral that contains arsenic. You can see the texture of it as she stirs, the way it clings to the wooden spoon, heavy and lifeless. It is a dangerous substance, a chemical fire that burns away hair, but can just as easily burn the skin if left a moment too long. The attendant applies it carefully to the skin, spreading the gray mud in thick, even layers. There is a tension in the room, a silent clock ticking down the seconds. The paste sits on the skin, doing its corrosive work, the smell rising up to fill the small cubicle, sticking to the back of the throat. It is a smell of industry, not of beauty, a reminder that the smooth, porcelain skin of the paintings is the result of a harsh and smelly process. When the time is up, the paste is scraped off with a wooden spatula, coming away in clumps of gray and black. The skin beneath is smooth, yes, but it is also tender and irritated, stripped bare by the lime. The water is poured again, cooler this time, to soothe the chemical burn, washing the gray sludge into the gutters. Follow the water now, as we turn our attention to the final act of the Hamam, the drainage. The floor of the bathhouse is a masterpiece of subtle gradients. Every slab of marble tilted just enough to guide the water where it needs to go. You watch a stream of soapy water, gray with the residue of the rusma and the dead skin of the scrub, as it begins its journey across the floor. It moves slowly, a winding river of waste navigating the white stone. It creates a web of foam that pops and hisses softly. It reaches the drain, a small brass grate set into the corner of the cubicle. You hear the distinct gurgle as the water swirls and vanishes, a sucking sound that marks the transition from the visible world to the invisible. Glug, glug, glug. Beneath the floor, in the dark spaces next to the furnace channels, lies a complex network of lead pipes. These pipes are old, their metal soft and dull, carrying the waste of the palace down the hillside and into the sea. You can imagine the sound inside those pipes, the rushing of thousands of gallons of water, a hidden river flowing through the dark. The sound echoes faintly up through the drain, a distant, hollow rushing noise that reminds you of the vast plumbing system required to keep this many people clean. The water disappears, taking with it the sweat, the chemicals, and the dust of the city. The marble floor is rinsed one last time with clear water, leaving it shining and reflective, a wet mirror waiting for the next bather. The acoustics of the room slowly settle as the splashing stops. The only sound left is the drip, drip, drip of condensation falling from the dome into the pools below, and the low, distant rumble of the furnace fires still burning beneath your feet, waiting to turn the next load of water into steam. The grim reality of hygiene is washed away, leaving only the heat and the silence. The sun has moved past its highest point and now hangs in the western sky, casting long, slanted shadows across the manicured gardens of the fourth courtyard. But here, on the upper floor of the harem, the light is filtered and fractured. You are standing in the cafes, the cage, the gilded apartment that serves as both a sanctuary and a prison for the heirs to the throne. The air here is still, preserved like the air in a museum. smelling faintly of dried rose petals and old dust. It is a silence that feels different from the rest of the palace, a silence not of discipline but of waiting, a suspension of time that has lasted for years. You walk toward the high windows that overlook the Bosphorus, drawn by the blue light of the sea. Between you and the view stands a heavy grille of gilded iron. The bars are not simple vertical rods. They are an intricate lattice of geometric shapes, stars and hexagons interlaced to form a beautiful, impenetrable barrier. You reach out and touch the metal. It is cold against your fingertips, a chill that seeps into your skin even in the heat of the afternoon. The gold leaf that covers the iron is smooth, but beneath it, you can feel the hardness of the metal, the unyielding strength that keeps the world out. Through the diamond-shaped gaps, the city of Istanbul looks like a painting, a fragmented mosaic of minarets and sails that you can see but never touch. You watch a seagull wheeling in the sky, free and chaotic, disappearing behind the gold bar, then reappearing in the next diamond, a brief flash of white against the blue. The sounds of the outside world drift up here only as a murmur, the call of a boatman, the distant bark of a dog, sounds that belong to a life that feels like a dream. Turn away from the window now, back into the dim luxury of the room, where time is measured not by the sun, but by the machines that sit on the mantelpiece. The princes of the cage have developed a deep and obsessive fascination with mechanical clocks, intricate gifts sent by European monarchs who know that the way to a captive's heart is to give him a way to count the seconds. On a velvet-covered table sits a collection of these brass marvels, their gears exposed behind glass cases. You can hear them, a chorus of rhythmic ticking that fills the room. Tick-tock, tick-tock, a constant reminder of the passing moments that lead to nowhere. A prince stands before a tall, ebony-cased clock, a key in his hand. You watch the ritual of the winding. He inserts the brass key into the hole in the face of the clock. It fits with a satisfying, snug click. He turns it. CR click. You can feel the tension building in the mainspring, the resistance of the metal coil tightening, storing the energy that will drive the next 24 hours. He winds it slowly, savoring the tactile feedback of the gears engaging. Inside the machine, tiny brass teeth mesh together, escapements rock back and forth, a miniature universe of order and logic that makes sense in a way the political world outside does not. The smell of clock oil is faint but distinct, a clean, mineral scent that hangs around the table. He closes the glass door of the clock face, and the ticking resumes, louder now, a heartbeat for a room that often feels asleep. It is a way to control time, to hold it in your hands and wind it up, the only control he has in a life governed by the whims of others. In the center of the room, seated on a low cushion, the prince turns to his other solace, the ancient and noble craft of woodworking. It is a tradition for Ottoman sultans and princes to learn a trade, to keep the hands busy and the mind focused, and here in the cage, it is a lifeline to sanity. He is carving a spoon from a block of cedar wood. The wood is reddish-brown, warm and dry, and as he slices into it with a small, sharp chisel, the room fills with the incredible, spicy scent of the timber. It smells of forests and resin, a sharp and invigorating aroma that cuts through the mustiness of the apartment. You watch the curl of the wood shaving as it peels away from the block, a perfect, thin spiral that falls silently onto the carpet. Scrape, slice, fall. The sound is whisper quiet, the friction of steel against soft wood. The floor around him is littered with these shavings, a pile of red gold that looks like fallen leaves. He is focused entirely on the curve of the spoon's bowl, smoothing out the rough edges, sanding it with a piece of dried shark skin until it is as smooth as glass. His hands are covered in fine wood dust, coating his fingers in a pale powder. This is a meditation, a way to shape something real, to take a raw material and impose his will upon it, creating a simple, useful object that will exist in the world even if he does not. The repetitive motion of the carving, the slide of the blade, the smell of the cedar, it all creates a bubble of peace, a moment where he is not a potential threat to the throne, but simply a craftsman lost in his work. Suspended from the painted ceiling, near the window where the light is best, hangs another cage, smaller and more delicate than the room itself. It is a bird cage made of silver wire, housing a pair of yellow canaries. These birds are the prince's constant companions, living mirrors of his own existence. They hop from perch to perch, their small claws making a tiny, scratching sound on the wood. Scratch, hop, flutter. They are bright flashes of color in the dim room, alive and vibrant. One of them throws its head back and begins to sing, a trilling, high-pitched melody that rises and falls, echoing off the high ceilings. It is a song of joy, or perhaps a song of territory, piercing the silence of the afternoon. The prince looks up from his wood carving, a faint smile touching his lips. He rises and walks to the cage, a small bag of millet seeds in his hand. He opens the small door, a door he can open, unlike his own, and scatters the seeds onto the floor of the cage. You hear the sound of the seeds hitting the metal tray, a sound like rain falling on a tin roof, patter, patter, patter. The birds flutter down, pecking at the food, chirping softly to one another. The smell of the birdseed is dry and earthy, mixing with the cedar and the clock oil. He watches them eat, his fingers tracing the silver wires of their cage. He understands them. He knows that they are well fed, safe from hawks and storms, surrounded by beauty, yet unable to fly beyond the silver bars. He whistles a low note, mimicking their song, and for a moment, the bird answers him. It is a conversation between captives, a shared understanding in the language of whistles and chirps, held in the golden light of the late afternoon, while the city outside moves on, indifferent and far away. As the sun begins to dip lower, the light in the room changes, shifting from the bright white of midday to a warmer, honey-colored glow. The shadows of the window grills stretch across the floor, elongating the geometric patterns until they touch the opposite wall. The prince returns to his cushion, picking up the cedar spoon once more. The clocks continue their relentless ticking, 1,000 tiny gears turning in unison. Tick-tock, tick-tock. The canaries settle down on their perches, fluffing their feathers against the coming evening. The world of the cage is small, defined by these sensory boundaries: the cold iron, the smell of cedar, the sound of gears, the flash of yellow wings. It is a world of waiting, a suspended animation where life is lived in the details, in the texture of wood and the rhythm of time. A quiet tragedy played out in a room filled with gold. The light in the privy chamber has turned to a deep and burnished copper, the late afternoon sun filtering through the stained glass windows and casting pools of colored light onto the thick carpets, marking the arrival of the hour when the man must disappear and the monarch must emerge. You are standing in the dressing room of the Sultan, a space that is less a room and more a sanctuary of fabric and silence, where the walls are lined with cupboards of cedar, and the air is heavy with the scent of dried lavender and precious wool. The day is beginning to wane. The sounds of the palace courtyard are softening into a distant hum, and in this quiet space, the ritual of the dressing begins, a transformation that is as much spiritual as it is physical. The Sultan stands in the center of the room, his silhouette framed by the dying light, waiting to be encased in the layers of his power. The ceremony starts with the layer that sits closest to the skin, the gamlek, a shirt of the finest white silk that is so sheer it seems to float in the hands of the servant who holds it. This is not merely a garment for warmth or modesty. It is a shield, a second skin inscribed with the holy words that protect the ruler from the evil eye and the swords of his enemies. As the shirt is unfolded, you hear the distinct and watery rustle of the silk, a sound like a soft breeze moving through dry grass, whispering of the prayers written upon it. The entire surface of the fabric is covered in intricate calligraphy, thousands of tiny Arabic letters written in an ink made from lampblack soot and dissolved saffron. The smell of the shirt is pungent and sacred, rising up to meet you as it is slipped over the Sultan's head. It smells of the charred wood of the ink and the metallic, floral tang of the saffron, a scent that is earthy and grounding. The silk settles onto his shoulders, cooling the skin, the weight of the ink almost perceptible, wrapping his torso in a grid of geometric blessings. You can imagine the scratch of the reed pen that created these lines, the hours of devotion poured into the fabric, now resting unseen against the beating heart of the empire. Now comes the weight, the heavy outer shell that will define his silhouette to the world. Two servants step forward, bearing the ceremonial kaftan, a robe of such magnificence that it seems to possess a gravity of its own. It is made of heavy brocade, woven in the imperial looms of Bursa, a stiff fabric of crimson silk shot through with threads of real gold that catch the last rays of the sun. The sound of the kaftan moving is different from the shirt. It is a heavy, crinkling sound, the noise of a fabric that does not bend easily. As they slide the robe onto the Sultan's arms, you can hear the friction of the silk lining against the gamlek, a dry hiss of luxury. The weight of it settles on him, squaring his shoulders, forcing his posture to become rigid and upright. The front of the robe is open, waiting to be sealed by a long line of fabric buttons, small knots of silk that run from the neck down to the waist. The fastening of these buttons is a slow and meditative process, a test of patience for the servant whose fingers must work with absolute precision. You watch the servant's hand, the fingers nimble and practiced, pinching the small silk knot and pushing it through the stiff loop of the opposing fabric. There is no click of metal, only the soft thud of the knot seating itself, followed by the pull of the loop. One button, then another, then another. It is a ladder of closure, each fastening pulling the stiff brocade tighter, encasing the Sultan in a column of gold and red. The room is silent save for the rhythmic breathing of the men and the faint rustle of the heavy sleeves. The fabric is so stiff that it stands away from the body slightly, creating a hollow space between the man and the robe, a space where the air is warm and still. The repetition of the buttoning is hypnotic, a counting down of the moments until the man is fully hidden behind the facade of the ruler. With the body armored in silk, the attention turns to the head, the seat of wisdom and authority. The Sultan sits on a low stool, and the chief turban winder approaches, carrying the kavuk, the quilted cap that forms the base of the headdress. He places it gently on the Sultan's shaved head, and then the winding begins. He holds a long roll of pristine white muslin, a fabric so fine it is almost transparent, yet strong enough to hold its shape. The winding is a dance of circular motion, a hypnotic orbiting of the hand around the still center of the Sultan's face. You watch the cloth unfurl, a white ribbon moving through the air. The winder places the end of the cloth against the cap and begins to wrap. He pulls the fabric tight, creating a tension that you can feel in the air, a necessary force to ensure the turban remains perfectly spherical and secure. Round and round and round. The sound is the softest of whispers, the cloth sliding over cloth, layer building upon layer. With each rotation, the turban grows, becoming a white dome that balances the visual weight of the heavy kaftan. The winder's eyes are narrowed in concentration, his hands moving with the memory of 1,000 windings, ensuring that the pleats are symmetrical, that the shape is flawless. The muslin smells of clean laundry and starch, a scent of purity that sits atop the heavy musk of the room. It is a sculpture made of fabric, a fragile yet imposing crown that signifies the burden of the state resting on one man's head. The final tuck is made, the end of the cloth concealed within the folds, leaving a seamless sphere of white that glows in the dim light. The final touch is the anointing, the application of scent that will announce the Sultan's presence before he even speaks. A servant brings a small tray holding a silver comb and 2 crystal vials, their stoppers cut like diamonds. One vial contains the oil of musk, a dark and animalistic scent derived from the deer of the high mountains, primal and commanding. The other holds ambergris, the waxy gold of the ocean, aged until it smells of earth and salt and tobacco. The servant mixes a drop of each on the teeth of the silver comb. You can smell the oils immediately, a heavy and intoxicating cloud that expands to fill the dressing room, masking the smell of the dust and the wool. It is a rich, dark smell, a scent of shadow and depth. The servant steps up to the Sultan and begins to comb his beard. The silver teeth glide through the dark hair, transferring the oil with every stroke. You hear the faint, metallic rasp of the comb, a rhythmic grooming sound that is intimate and soothing. The oil coats the beard, making it shine in the lantern light, taming the hair into a perfect shape. The smell of the ambergris clings to the hair, a long-lasting perfume that will linger in the corridors long after the Sultan has passed. The comb moves slowly, from the chin down to the chest, a final act of polishing the icon. The Sultan closes his eyes for a moment, inhaling the scent of his own power, the musk filling his lungs, grounding him in the sensory reality of his station. The comb is set down with a soft click on the tray. The dressing is complete. The man who entered the room has vanished, replaced by a figure of gold, silk, and white muslin, a statue that smells of the sea and the earth, standing ready in the silence of the late afternoon, waiting for the doors to open and the evening to begin. The day has finally exhausted itself, and the sun has dipped below the rim of the 7 hills, leaving behind a sky that is transforming from a pale blue into a deep and bruised indigo. You are standing in the great central corridor of the harem, a long and echoing spine of the palace that connects the world of the servants to the world of the Sultan, and the air here has grown cool and thin. The stone walls are beginning to release the chill they have held deep within their masonry all afternoon, and the golden light that once flooded the floors has retreated, replaced by a gray and shadowy twilight that blurs the edges of the furniture and makes the distant corners disappear into darkness. It is the hour of the blue transition, the time when the palace holds its breath between the clarity of the daylight and the mystery of the night. You can feel the change in the atmosphere, a settling of the dust, a quieting of the birds in the gardens outside, and a sense of anticipation for the artificial light that must now be summoned to fight back the encroaching dark. From the far end of the hallway, a team of servants emerges to begin the ritual of the illumination, moving with a synchronized purpose that has been practiced for centuries. They carry with them the tools of their trade, long poles tipped with hooks and brass pitchers filled with heavy oil, and their soft shoes make no sound on the marble as they approach the first great chandelier. This is not a simple task of flipping a switch. It is a mechanical and physical labor that requires strength and patience. You watch as one of the men raises his pole, catching the iron ring at the base of the hanging lamp. There is a metallic groan, a sound of heavy iron rubbing against iron, as the counterweights are engaged and the great glass globe is slowly lowered from the high ceiling. It descends through the gloom like a captured moon, swaying gently on its long chain, the links clicking against one another with a rhythm that sounds like rain falling on a tin roof. The glass of the globe is thick and hand-blown, filled with tiny bubbles and imperfections that catch the fading light, and it is cool to the touch as the servant steadies it with his hand. Now comes the pouring of the oil, a sensory experience that fills the corridor with the smell of the earth and the groves of the Mediterranean. The servant tilts the brass pitcher, the metal spout gleaming dully in the twilight, and a stream of thick golden liquid begins to flow. It is olive oil, pressed from the trees of the Aegean coast, unrefined and heavy, possessing a pungent and grassy scent that is both savory and raw. You can hear the oil glugging softly as it leaves the pitcher, a viscous and heavy sound as it fills the glass reservoir of the lamp. It swirls inside the glass, green and gold, coating the sides with a heavy film. The smell is strong here, rising up to mix with the cool air, a smell that speaks of agriculture and harvest brought into the heart of the imperial city. The servant takes a fresh wick, a simple length of twisted cotton, and submerges it into the oil, watching as the fabric drinks up the fuel, turning from white to a translucent yellow. He strikes a spark. It is a sharp and sudden sound, a crack of flint that is followed by the smell of sulfur, and then a tiny orange flame blooms on the tip of the wick. It is small at first, fragile and trembling in the draft of the hallway, but it quickly takes hold, feeding on the oil, growing into a steady and teardrop-shaped light that pushes back the shadows. The globe is raised back up into the darkness of the vaulted ceiling, the chains singing their metallic song once more, and as it ascends, the light it casts begins to transform the architecture around you. This is the magic of the Eunuch tiles, the thousands of ceramic squares that line the walls of the harem, painted with the tulips and carnations of the Ottoman spring. In the flat light of the day, they are beautiful but static, yet under the flickering and warm glow of the oil lamp, they come alive in a way that feels organic and fluid. The flame is not constant. It dances and shivers with every breath of air, and this movement is mirrored in the glaze of the tiles. You watch the wall, and it seems to ripple like the surface of a pond disturbed by a stone. The cobalt blues deepen into the color of the midnight sea. The turquoise greens flash with the brightness of shallow water, and the bowl red of the tulips seems to pulse as if blood were flowing through the ceramic veins. The uneven surface of the glaze catches the firelight, creating thousands of tiny starbursts that shift and move as you walk past. The wall is no longer solid stone. It is a living curtain of color and light, a shimmering mosaic that breathes in time with the flame. As more lamps are lit down the length of the corridor, a new population begins to inhabit the palace, a silent army of shadows that stretches and twists along the white plaster walls. The servants moving through the halls are no longer just men and women. They have become giants, their silhouettes elongated by the low angle of the light until they touch the ceiling. You watch a young girl carrying a tray of water, her shadow trailing behind her like a dark cape, 20 feet long and distorted, her simple movements turned into a dramatic dance by the physics of the flame. These are the shadow puppets of the harem, the Karagah's play brought to life, where every mundane action is projected onto the walls in a display of stark contrast. The flickering light makes the shadows tremble, giving them a nervous energy, as if the walls themselves are crowded with spirits watching the night begin. You see the shadow of a guard, the outline of his tall turban magnified until it looks like a mountain on the wall, and the shadow of his spear cutting a sharp black line across the delicate flowers of the tiles. The corridor is filled with this silent movement, a visual echo of the life that pulses within the palace, a world of black and white dancing on a stage of blue and gold. But the night is not just about light. It is about enclosure, and the final ritual of the evening is the sealing of the palace against the outside world. You can hear the wind beginning to pick up outside, a breeze coming off the Black Sea that whistles through the cypress trees and rattles the loose panes of the windows. It is a lonely sound, a reminder of the vast and empty dark that lies beyond the walls. Then, the closing of the shutters begins. It starts in the far rooms, a distant and muffled thud that travels through the stone structure. Bang, then another. Bang. It is a rhythmic and sequential percussion, a drumbeat of wood against stone that moves closer and closer to where you stand. You watch a servant approach the large window at the end of the hall, the one that looks out over the dark water. He reaches out and unhooks the heavy iron latch that holds the wooden shutters open. The wood is old, seasoned oak that has weathered centuries of rain and sun, and it is warped and gray on the outside. He pulls the left shutter in, the hinges screaming with a high-pitched protest of dry metal. Screech, then the right shutter. He brings them together with a heavy slam. Thud. The sound is final and authoritative. The view of the night sky, the stars, and the distant lights of the ships is instantly cut off. The draft that was cooling your ankles suddenly stops. The noise of the wind is muted, turned into a dull roar that feels miles away. He drops the heavy iron bar into its cradle across the shutters, locking them in place with a clunk that signifies safety and isolation. The palace is turning inward, curling up on itself like a sleeping animal. The air inside becomes still and rapidly warms up, trapped between the stone and the wood, holding the scent of the olive oil and the wax. One by one, the windows of the harem are blinded, the eyes of the palace closing for sleep. You listen to the rhythm of it, the bang-clack traveling away from you now, moving to the upper floors, to the Queen Mother's apartments, to the prince's cage. It is the sound of the day officially ending, the physical barrier being erected between the dangerous freedom of the night and the regulated safety of the interior. The world outside no longer exists. There is only the long corridor, the rippling blue tiles, the smell of burning oil, and the long, dancing shadows that guide you toward the silence of the deep night. The night has now fully settled into the stones of the palace, a heavy and velvet darkness that presses against the closed shutters. But here in the heart of the residence, In the long and legendary corridor known as the Golden Road, the atmosphere has shifted from the rigid discipline of the day to a soft and languid indulgence. You are walking down this fabled hallway, the artery that connects the crowded quarters of the harem to the solitary sanctuary of the Sultan, and the air here is warm and still, holding the accumulated heat of the lamps and the bodies that have moved through it. It is 9 o'clock, the hour of the evening vigil, the time when the work of the empire is done and the work of the soul begins. The stone walls, usually so cold and imposing, are now softened by a haze of golden light and drifting smoke, creating a tunnel that feels less like architecture and more like a dreamscape suspended in time. Your attention is drawn first to the ground, to the sensation of the floor beneath your feet, for you are walking on the most exquisite surface the Ottoman world can produce. The cold marble of the earlier hours has vanished, covered completely by a runner of Hurrique carpet that stretches endlessly into the gloom. This is not merely a rug. It is a landscape of woven wool and silk, a masterpiece of double knots tied by the fingers of women in distant mountain villages. You are barefoot, as is the custom here, and you can feel the incredible density of the pile as your weight sinks into it. It is a slow and tactile experience, a feeling of being embraced by the floor. The wool is thick and plush, rising up to meet the arch of your foot, absorbing every impact, swallowing every sound. You take a step, and there is no thud, no click, only a soft and muffled compression that feels like walking on deep, dry moss in an ancient forest. The pattern of the carpet is complex, a garden of red peonies and blue vines, but in the dim light you feel it more than you see it. You feel the slight variation in the texture where the silk thread creates a flower against the matte background of the wool. It is a sensory luxury that forces you to slow down, to walk with a deliberate and rolling gait. You can imagine the thousands of hours of labor that went into this path, the sheer human effort required to create a surface that makes you feel as though you are floating inches above the stone. The silence is absolute, insulated by the heavy textiles, a hushed quiet that makes the ringing in your own ears seem loud. As you drift further down the Golden Road, a new scent begins to weave itself into the air, heavier and more complex than the olive oil of the lamps or the soap of the bath. It is the smell of bakhor, the traditional incense of the court, burning slowly in tall brass burners placed in the alcoves. You can see the smoke before you smell it, a thin and gray ribbon curling lazily into the air, twisting and turning in the draft of your passing. It rises in a column, thick and opaque, before dispersing into a blue haze that hangs near the ceiling. The smell is profound, a deep and resinous aroma of agarwood chips, soaked in jasmine oil and amber. It is a sweet, woody scent that catches in the back of the throat, a smell that has defined the evenings of the East for 1,000 years. It acts as a visual filter, softening the sharp edges of the stone arches and the iron grills, making the end of the corridor blur into a foggy distance. The smoke catches the light of the oil lamps, turning the beams into solid bars of gold that cut through the darkness. You watch a cloud of smoke drift across a tile panel, obscuring the flowers for a moment before clearing, a slow reveal that mimics the movement of clouds across a moon. The incense seems to slow time itself, its lazy, curling movement suggesting that there is no rush, no urgency, only the slow burn of the wood and the rising of the scent. It settles in your hair and in your clothes, a perfume of peace that signifies the transition from the public world to the private. From somewhere ahead, perhaps from behind a screened lattice or from the Sultan's own chamber, comes the sound of music. It is not an orchestra, but a solitary instrument, the deep and resonant voice of the oud. You stop to listen, letting the sound wash over you in the quiet corridor. It is a plucked sound, the strike of a plectrum against gut strings, a noise that is both percussive and melodic. Pluck, thrum, vibration. You can hear the wood of the instrument responding, the hollow bowl of the oud amplifying the note, giving it a warm and woody timbre that sounds like a human voice humming. The musician is playing a taksim, an improvisation in a minor mode, exploring the microtones that lie between the notes of the Western scale. It is a melancholy sound, a falling cadence that speaks of longing and the vastness of the night. The notes hang in the air, echoing slightly off the plaster walls before being absorbed by the heavy carpets. It is music that is meant to be felt in the chest, a low-frequency vibration that matches the slow beating of a resting heart. There is a pause between the phrases, a silence that is just as important as the notes, a breath taken by the player and by the listener. The music drifts through the incense smoke, a sad and beautiful soundtrack to the evening, wandering through the scales without a destination, content to simply exist in the moment. It is the sound of the palace talking to itself, a private conversation in the language of wood and string. You arrive finally at a small seating area, a waiting station along the road where a low table has been set for the evening's refreshment. The table is a jewel in the darkness, made of dark walnut and inlaid with intricate geometric stars of mother of pearl that catch the lamplight and flash with iridescence. On the table sits a silver tray, and upon it, the simple harvest of the empire's orchards. There are dried apricots from Malaya, bright orange and flattened, their skins slightly sticky with natural sugar. You reach out and pick one up. The texture is leathery and yielding. You bite into it, and the sound is a soft, wet tear. It is chewy and dense, releasing a burst of concentrated sweetness that tastes of the sun and the summer earth. It is a slow food, requiring you to chew methodically, the flavor evolving as you eat. Next to the fruit is a bowl of roasted pistachios from Antep, their shells open just a crack, revealing the green and purple nut inside. You pick one up, the shell warm and dry against your fingertips. You apply pressure. Crack. The sound is sharp and distinct, a dry snap that cuts through the soft music of the oud. You pull the shell apart, the two halves falling to the tray with a light clatter. The nut is salty and rich, crumbling slightly as you eat it. The rhythm of the eating, the reach, the crack, the chew, becomes a small ritual of its own. Crack, silence, chew. You wash it down with a sip of water from a crystal glass, the cool liquid clearing the palate. The combination of the sweet fruit, the salty nut, the deep music, and the heavy incense creates a sensory blanket that wraps around you. The Golden Road is no longer just a hallway. It is a destination, a suspended reality where the grim logistics of the morning and the harsh heat of the day are forgotten, replaced by the soft textures of wool, the smell of amber, and the taste of the drying summer sun. The hour is late, and the moon has climbed to its highest station in the black sky, hanging like a lantern of white bone over the silent domes of the palace. You have reached the final watch, the time when the great machine of the empire finally ceases its motion and surrenders to the necessity of sleep. The corridors that were once filled with the echo of footsteps and the murmur of voices are now empty. reclaimed by the shadows that stretch out from the corners. You are standing in the dormitory of the novices, a long and vaulted hall where the transition from day to night is marked not by the closing of doors, but by the transformation of the floor itself. In this world, sleep is not a permanent fixture, but a temporary architecture, built anew each night and dismantled each morning. You watch as the cupboard doors, the yuklux, are opened along the walls. They creak softly, revealing the stacks of bedding stored within. Servants move with the slow, heavy limbs of exhaustion, pulling down the mattresses. These are not the sprung beds of the West, but heavy rolls of thick cotton stuffed with raw wool, dense and organic. You hear the dull, muted thud as the first mattress hits the carpeted floor. Thump, then another. Thump. It is a sound of weight and comfort, a sound that signals the end of labor. They unroll the mattresses, the wool settling with a soft sigh, creating a landscape of white islands on the dark sea of the floor. The air fills with the faint, dusty scent of the wool and the clean smell of the linen sheets that are snapped open and laid over the bedding. You watch the fluffing of the pillows, long bolsters stuffed with goose down that are beaten softly to introduce air back into the feathers. Whomp whomp. The sound is muffled and rhythmic. The girls move in silence, finding their assigned places, the hierarchy of the day dissolving into the equality of sleep. There is a rustle of nightclothes, the soft friction of cotton against skin, and then the settling in. One by one, the figures lower themselves onto the wool, the mattresses groaning faintly under the shifting weight. The room, which was a place of embroidery and discipline just hours ago, has become a soft and vulnerable sanctuary, a field of white linen waiting for the dark. Now the light must be banished, for the darkness is the guardian of rest. A senior eunuch moves through the room, carrying a long brass pole topped with a small metal cone, the candle snuffer. He moves to the wall sconces where the thick beeswax candles have been burning for hours, their sides now dripping with stalactites of melted wax. He raises the pole. You watch the metal cone descend over the flickering yellow flame. There is a brief moment of resistance, the flame fighting for air, and then it is gone. In its place, a thin, gray ribbon of smoke rises straight up into the still air. You can smell it immediately, the distinct and sharp scent of extinguished fire, followed by the heavier, cloying smell of hot wax cooling rapidly in the night air. It is a smell of finality, a scent that says the day is irrevocably done. He moves to the next candle. Snuff. And the next. Snuff. With each extinguished flame, the room grows larger and deeper, the walls receding into the gloom until only the moonlight filtering through the high windows remains. The blue light of the moon falls across the sleeping forms, turning the white sheets into ghostly shrouds, painting the room in shades of silver and black. The smell of the cooling wax lingers, a memory of the light that has passed, mixing with the wool and the slow breathing of the room. With the silence now absolute inside the walls, the sounds of the world outside begin to assert themselves, audible only now that the human noise has finally stopped. You move to the window, pressing your ear against the cold glass. The wind has picked up, coming down from the Black Sea, rushing through the darkness to sweep the city clean. You can hear it moving through the tall, dark shapes of the cypress trees in the garden below. It is a restless, rushing sound, a shhhhhh that rises and falls like the breathing of the ocean. The trees rattle, their dry needles brushing against one another, a million tiny scratches that blend into a single, mournful voice. You can hear the wooden shutters of the palace groaning slightly in their frames, the iron latches clicking as they resist the pressure of the breeze. It is a reminder that while the palace sleeps, the world does not. The wind carries the damp smell of the Bosphorus, the salt and the seaweed, pushing it against the stone walls, trying to find a way in. But the walls hold. The contrast makes the silence inside feel even deeper, a protected stillness that is defined by the chaotic movement of the wind outside. You feel safe here, enclosed in stone and iron, listening to the wildness of the night from the other side of the glass. Turn back to the room now, to the long rows of sleeping figures, and listen to the final sound of the story. It is not a mechanical sound, nor the sound of the elements, but the sound of life itself. It is the rhythmic breathing of the palace. At first, it seems like silence, but as your ears adjust, you can hear it. It is a soft, collective rising and falling, a tide of air moving in and out of hundreds of lungs. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. It is a slow and steady rhythm, a synchronization of rest. You can imagine it extending beyond this room, down the corridors, into the golden cage where the princes sleep, into the high chamber of the Valide Sultan, even to the secluded bed of the Sultan himself. The entire complex, this city of stone and secrets, is breathing in unison. It is the sound of a great organism repairing itself, the tension of the day released in the long, slow sighs of the night. The guards at the door stand like statues, their breathing controlled and silent, but even they are part of this rhythm. The stone walls themselves seem to absorb this sound, holding the memory of centuries of sleepers. The air is heavy with carbon dioxide and warmth, a physical weight that presses down on your eyelids. The rhythm is contagious. You feel your own breath slowing to match it. Inhale, exhale. The day is gone. The history is written. There is nothing left to do, nothing left to see, only this deep, dark, and endless ocean of sleep. The palace drifts on through the night, a ship of stone floating on a sea of dreams, waiting for the sun that is hours and hours away. The great palace of Topkapi has now fallen into a deep, heavy slumber. The intricate tiles are shrouded in darkness, watching over the empty corridors. The fires in the Hamam have burned down to soft, glowing embers, and the turning box in the wall stands still. The only movement now is the moonlight drifting across the Bosphorus, casting a pale glow over the domes and minarets. The history we have walked through is now just a whisper, a memory fading into the velvet night. You are safe here, in the quiet comfort of your own space, far removed from the cold stone and the heavy iron gates. Let the silence of the ancient palace wrap around you like a heavy quilt. The day is done. The ledger is closed. There is nothing left to organize, nothing left to guard. Just the slow, steady tide of sleep rising to meet you. Good night. The great palace of Topkapi has now fallen into a deep, heavy slumber. The intricate tiles are shrouded in darkness, watching over the empty corridors. The fires in the Hamam have burned down to soft, glowing embers, and the turning box in the wall stands still. The only movement now is the moonlight drifting across the Bosphorus, casting a pale glow over the domes and minarets. The history we have walked through is now just a whisper, a memory fading into the velvet night. You are safe here, in the quiet comfort of your own space, far removed from the cold stone and the heavy iron gates. Let the silence of the ancient palace wrap around you like a heavy quilt. The day is done. The ledger is closed. There is nothing left to organize, nothing left to guard. Just the slow, steady tide of sleep rising to meet you. Good night.